Hello everyone, a very good morning to all of you. Hope you all have your CR worksheet related to mock 68 that was conducted on Sunday. It's nice to see many of you taking mock seriously. And as you know, paper-based mocks are also, and you can download the thing and you can solve it on the OMR and send it across. Okay. By doing that, what happens is we'll be able to upload your result, and down the line we can give you AR predictions. I mean, what is the rank that you're there? Okay. Good morning, Samyukta. Good morning, Kavya. Good morning, everyone. Okay. So let's move on to today's session then. We are going to discuss mock 68 critical reasoning. And in the last session, we've done some questions related to the mock. And I'm sure you've got a good taste of the different question types there. So let's look into some other question types today and also focus on learning some new tips. In this mock, there are two question types that are more dominant, which are more in terms of the role played by a particular sentence and general statements related to the passage. How do we connect that? We'll see some examples related to that, apart from many other question types related to assumptions and conclusions and other aspects. Okay, so we have the first passage, which is related to Perry project. In the last mock session, what I've done is I actually tried to underline some keywords. In today's session, I'll discuss the passage for you, but I'll also highlight some specific words and how you need to be cautious around those words. Because reasoning and mock exams, these are two things, anything related to mocks and reasoning. One thing I want to say is, we learn strategies, we understand how to do things. But the advantage that we get with practice is we are familiar with the way different sentences come up. So there is an alertness in our mind whenever we come across such things. And hence, we will not fall for the traps. Our practice for mocks not just helps us to do questions correctly, accurately, in a given amount of time, but it also prepares us for the eclectic writing styles or the eclectic topics, eclectic passages, or the different traps. Okay, so not just the way to handle particular questions, the traps also will be taken care of with practice. So that's why I want you guys now, this is June 30th, and you have your exam on July 23rd, right? So I want you guys to practice a lot. Give good amount of practice, because this is the main exam for you, and this is going to be your biggest achievement, your World Cup for 2021, right? One of the happiest moments that can put away all the gloomy thing of the pandemic for you and your family, right? And for us also. So let's get started. The Perry project in 1960s randomly selected African American children born into poverty for high quality preschool and followed those students throughout their lives. Those who attended preschools had higher earnings, were more likely to hold a job and commit fewer crimes. But high quality preschool is expensive, and most parents struggle to afford any daycare, much less a program that meets quality benchmarks. So here we are talking about Perry project, right? And the Perry project relates to 1960s. Whenever you have time, whenever you have timeline given in any reasoning question, it's related to a chronological aspect, right? Chronology related reasoning flaws also are possible. So how much do we consider this aspect as a support or opposing thing for our passages? We have to be alert. In this passage, we don't have so much issue with this chronology, but I'm just giving you a general information. Always look into the time aspect. Next one, randomly selected African American children. So this kind of gives you an idea about the population sample, right? We always talk about sample size in reasoning, and we need to address the questions related to sample size also. So you'll always listen to a word called sample here, and sample aspect here, African American children, who are we taking into consideration, and especially related to poverty lines. So we are not taking it in the wide range of economic status, we are only taking it specifically the poor people. And how are they selected? Through some test or randomly? Randomly is a keyword there. It's not through some select methodology. It's randomly selected. Okay. So these three keywords actually trigger us into three different question types also if we really have to see. Okay. So when you're learning, your alertness will prepare you for all these things. And by in the next few weeks, after all these mock analysis, I hope you will also come across through this thinking process. Okay. Let's move on to the next one. That's why a foundation is sponsoring a new approach to breaking the cycle of poverty. It tries to give children access to high quality early childhood education while helping parents get better jobs and build stronger families. It's called the two-generation approach and has been found to be one of the best bets in helping the family. So here you're talking about the 2G approach, two-generation approach, which was started by a foundation, and we discussed the features related to that. The strategy has proven successful as parents show up at the Center for Working Families up the hill to register for job or career council. Kids cannot enroll at educate sites unless parents register for the thing. So basically they are both linked up. So parents who are actually interested in their kids' future are forced to register there also. By doing that, what happens is if the motivation in a family is coming either from the child's side or from the parent side, since both are willing to help each other, both people benefit, right? So even if there is internal motivation coming from the child's perspective or the parent's perspective, they are forced to benefit both of them, and hence the family is in a good shape. The center has placed 1,800 people in jobs and annually connects people with refunds, etc. Literacy training is also helping parents so that they can read. Counselors provide some kind of support also. So basically you are talking about the benefits. So here we are all talking about the benefits aspect. Now, 2G programs are not new, however. So basically this concept is not totally new, the 2G approach, but the way it was addressed earlier is slightly different from the way it is addressed today. So that could be the reason for the current one to come up, current idea to come up. Because when something is working, you might not think about changing it. But if something is not working, we'll have to think of an approach which is slightly different. Like for instance, some of you might be saying, ma'am, I'm spending 8 hours a day on my material, but I'm not seeing significant improvement. Well, then the question is, we need to understand why our 8 hours are not effectively useful. So we need to look at the other aspects. Am I focusing on the relevant aspects, or am I focusing on the right thing that I need to be doing at this point of time? Or am I assuming that I'm actually spending good amount of time, but that is not properly utilized, effectively utilized? Because duration is one thing we can measure, but effectiveness we cannot measure. So anytime when something is not giving the expected output, we need to look into. So that's what this program has taken a new route. Why? Because the previous one focused on workforce policy. Policies, obviously, sometimes when reforms come up, policymakers involved might focus on what is actually looked at. Because yeah, we know that children don't have right to vote. We are ignored. We ignore most of them when it comes to the political manifestos also, right? The work people, and the focus is more about the employable and voting population when it comes to policies sometimes. So yeah, this model favors parents who have wherewithal to fight to get to their children enrolled in school and to get themselves some help. But what about parents who are too overwhelmed to take any steps for themselves or their children? What about those people who are not willing to take anything for their kids? And they're the ones that need the most help. But research suggests 2Gen program could be more effective than offering just job training or childcare independently, because being a part of both programs often motivates them to behave differently. So the reason they are trying to say, why shouldn't we focus on only those people who don't take care on kids? By doing that, what will happen? You will focus on the kids. Done. You focus on the kids, but what happens when the child goes back home? He might not have that kind of environment. Hence, the support that is required from a working parent, or the support that is required at least in the aspect of motivation or suggestion or a support that provides an environment to study, might not be there. Hence, it's not successful early also. That's the reason the current 2G approach, which includes both parents and children, is considered to be beneficial. So this is the basic structure and basic idea of the passage. Okay. If you have any questions, you can key in the chat box, guys. Once I'm done with the passage, I'll address each of them. So let me go back and handle the questions here now. Which of the following assumptions is true regarding the 2G model? So we are talking about 2G model. What is the assumption that is true? Let's look at the options here. Sometimes, obviously, we'll get some answers here, but if you are not able to get the answers, proceed to the options and eliminate, compare it with the passage and choose your answer. First one, it is biased and does it benefit individuals who are in utmost requirement of the same? We had this point addressed in the last line of the last paragraph of the passage, where it kind of said, why aren't we taking care of the population that actually needs it, because they don't take care of themselves. But the research said that it is beneficial only when both parents and children are involved. So this is wrong. This part is wrong. It has a potential to benefit the poor parents as well as their children who are poverty stricken. Now that's definitely the model that we created. So this could be my answer. It cannot see success in the incumbent form due to being monetarily unstable. Now, whatever form that was existing, right? That incumbent means existing, right? I'm sure you've heard about incumbent government, right? So it didn't work because it's one-sided aspect. It's not only because of monetary aspects or money-related aspects. The motivation, the atmosphere, the ambience in the family that gets improved because of both being involved in the project was the reason for its success. So hence, in all these cases, B looks like a better answer because it's a program which benefits both children and parents, and straightforward, that's the key. Next one. Which of the statements is correct about educate in the passage? So whenever you have such questions, whenever something is about which of the following is correct, always go back into the passage, connect it with some lines or information which can prove it right. This is definitely a time-consuming question comparatively because you need to carefully see all options, right? That's how the standard process that we go. Another thing that we could do is always plug and play with the options. Because sometimes there will be a sentence which you are finding it difficult to connect with the passage. It's time consuming to actually look at the thing. Like for instance, let me say the statement. The word poor people is very clearly mentioned in the passage. If there is a statement in the option which kind of says the marginalized people who are in the vicious cycle, then that line might not strike immediately to some at least. Then what you do, look at options, plug and play, and then go for your answer because it's exam. Right now we are talking about exam strategies. Learning aspect is different, knowledge aspect is different, but now is the attack mode that we need to get into because here is the exam coming up and we need to focus on that. Okay? So this is how we should go there. It has gained massive popularity. Now the word massive is there, which is like huge. But let's see, is it popular than the previous one? Yes. Do we have some statements in the passage which we can say that the strategy is successful? Yes, it has proven successful. Did we talk about some benefits in the passage? Yes, we did talk about it. So this option, I can connect it as an answer. I'll put it there. Okay? It offers literacy training. Yes, definitely we have that factual line in the passage. There is literacy training for parents so they can read with their children. So second one is definitely right. Because factually it is connected. Massive popularity is a adjective word that I have to find another answer and relate to it. It benefits poor families holistically since enrollment in the center is for working families. Obviously, people who are working families here, center for working families. Here the context is more like the working class families, right? Blue collar jobs, white collar jobs. You might have heard the terminology that is used in the economy generally, right? So here it's more related to that. So considering all the three things, I think we could we have our answer here. 1, 2, and 3 can be our things. 1, 2, and 3 can be our things. Okay, am I clear? Okay, good. One very important thing. Last week also we had a question type which was related to women coming up and doing an agitation. And when you have such revolutions or policies or some kind of agitations where they are talking about population or people involved, always look at the people who are involved. Are they only women? Are they only children? Are they parents and children? Are they from rich backgrounds? Are they from poor backgrounds? Are they from different backgrounds? These lines are key for you to find answers to some options, because the questions and options are usually tricky statements are made around those lines. You can be alert. Okay? Okay. Move on to the next one. Which of the following factors has impacted the implementation of the two-generation model? This question is a little, what I would say, it's okay, but we could have improved it a little bit, because I would prefer the word initially also here, because the initial policy got affected and that's why the second policy has come up. So the initial policy got affected because the focus was on a different direction. So considering that, it would become B as an answer. Otherwise, it might give you a confusion with the way the sentence is there, or are you thinking about the current project or the past project, etc. The initial model kind of got affected by that, and the foundation which started off went on in a different direction. So if you want to look at it either in the past aspect, initial model, why that didn't get successful, or in the current aspect, what made it successful, either way, the focus part of it was different. The focus part of it was different, and hence I can go with that as a possible answer. First one doesn't become an answer, so both A and B is not an answer. Okay? So I can eliminate A and C in one go. And always be cautious whenever you have options which say all the above or none of the above and all, because they take a little time there. Next one, which of the following can be concluded from the study cited in the passage? Preschool education benefits children from poor families throughout life. Now we have that line, right? Follow those students throughout their lives, and less crime rate, better job opportunity. So we have seen that they benefited throughout. So that is evidently given. So I can think of that as an answer. But as I told you earlier also, let's look at all options. Education is out of reach for the majority of the society. Majority is a descriptive word. Now, I don't know how many people are actually in the poverty line who are not able to reach the education system. Now, for instance, if I would say pandemic has affected families a lot, and education has 90% of the people have cut down their economic costs towards education, or that kind of statements come up, then maybe I'll think of it. But no, that is not at all what we have in the passage. So standard testing in schools needs to be revamped. We didn't discuss that. This is not at all aligned. Standardized testing in schools is a topic that is coming up these days a lot, because what is this is basically, you have these exams, right? Even anything like SAT, GRE, or even CLAT, which are like tests kind of thing. What happens is those who have the opportunities to get trained might benefit more, and hence there's always a discussion about this in terms of having such tests in selection processes, etc. That's always there in the industry of education or in the education system. But yeah, there's no connection in the passage related to that. Okay? Next, children and families where both parents work have adjustment problems. Again, we talked about the benefits of both children and parents, both of them involved in the project, but adjustment issues are not discussed. So again, gone. So I'll be left with first option. Next one, which of the following seems to be the main idea of the passage? 2G approach, benefiting children and parents from the poor backgrounds. That's the focus. Let's see the options. To discuss an approach to address poverty involving both parents and children. To criticize the present governments for high poverty. No, we didn't discuss that. To urge governments to disperse more aid to poor nations. We didn't discuss that. Urge governments to disperse more aid to poor nations. This line is more like, for instance, if there's a G20 or a G7 or a USA, you're talking to such countries and telling that, okay, give money to developing countries or give money to those countries which are financially poor. It's more like with the pandemic, send doses of vaccines to those countries which don't have enough mechanism to produce their own vaccinations, etc. Because if you look at the current scenario of vaccinations and all, there are few countries who are the major players in the pharma industry, and India is one of those, definitely in the top 5 according to my knowledge. You can see the facts more. So that's what it is. These countries will have a responsibility to spread across also, right? So that there will be a pressure on such countries, obviously. So yeah. Next, to point out how standardized tests discriminate against first students, again, it's a different aspect here. The only reason this line can be coming up often is the quality benchmarks line that we have in the first paragraph, right? That is probably the reason this line of standardized tests is coming up in the options. However, it's not something that determines any of our answers. It was more put up that select for students, if they have to meet some criteria to get into a school, these people will have trouble. That is what that line in the first paragraph, last line, is trying to say. Okay, so that's it with this passage. Pretty readable passage. There's no difficulty in interpreting the passage. Options part of it, I don't think there's any difficulty. If there's a difficulty between 109 and 110, these are the two questions which might take a little longer time, because not because it's difficult, but only because they have this all the above and none of the above statements. Any questions related to the first one? I assume there are none, as I haven't seen anything. Okay. Fine then. Let's move on to the second one then. Can we move on to the second passage? Can one of you key in the answers also, guys? Like last class, one of you have done that. That was good. So any late joinees can see that too. Okay. Let's move on to the second passage. Let's move on to the second passage now. What is this passage about? We are talking about politics and campaigns and deceptive way of sharing information. That's the focus of this passage. So let's read it and underline important words and information that we need. American political groups invest in deceptively named websites to make their arguments seem more legitimate. Legitimate is like right and appropriate. The Free Telegraph and American Ledger. So you put a point there and you try to give example of two such websites or two such information sites. One of these purported news organizations, it's run by Democratic Super PAC, and one is run by Republican Governors Association. At freetelegraph.com, readers find stories criticizing Democrats. So this should give us information that it is a pro-Republican. So even if this line of praising governors, luckily we have this line which makes our job easy. But even if we don't have this line, we should be able to infer that from that statement. Okay, and then what they talk about is discussed. The site is sponsored by RGA, Republican governors kind of thing. If you click through and scroll at all the way down to the bottom of an article, you'll see a note sponsored by RGA. But on Twitter, where the Free Telegraph shares its article to 54,000 followers, the website is described only as your home for breaking conservative news and political opinion. So you're kind of saying what's on Twitter, but you are not mentioning anything about RGA. Articles are shared on Facebook by Republican Party chapters. Because the name Free Telegraph suggests a generic, something that is not very specific or associated to any particular political party, that could be located anywhere. The Republican Party is giving off the impression that its political positions are backed up by legitimate reporting when all these pages are doing sharing campaign talking points. They're trying to put it on Twitter. AmericanLedger.com is run by American Bridge PAC, a leading Democratic super PAC. So another one is Democrats. This site only notes at the bottom of each page paid for by AB PAC, with no further explanation of what it is. So there's no detailed abbreviation. Full form is not written. Posts are opposites of everything on FT. They provide negative coverage of Republicans. It should be inferred from the the previous line itself. It's basically a hub for anti-GOP opposition research, which makes sense given how Republican American Bridge, which makes sense given how American Bridge describes itself. We find what Republicans are hiding and make sure voters hear about it. The site's Twitter page says its goal is empowering public and exposing wrongdoing. American Ledger's articles have been posted by left-leaning people with in-person campaign events on hold. Social media matters more than ever for candidates. So yeah, they're taking social media a lot. Political campaigns will continue looking for new ways to reach to voters, and deceptive news sites like these are an increasingly popular method. So the passage is focusing on the political campaigns and the deceptive news sites. That's the connection and that's the primary focus. You have two political parties here, Democrats and Republicans, that we are talking about, and their relevant supportive news channels that we have. So new media, which is backing a particular news channel, media which is backing a political party, that kind of thing. We also call something called as paid media is another terminology that comes up a lot in terms of media and publicity activities, etc. That's why whenever we talk about information, sometimes different papers might project an information in different ways. An American newspaper might publish an information in one way about India, and an Indian newspaper might also publish it in another way. So what you have to take it as facts, take it and make your own conclusions. That way you'll develop your own thinking process. Don't depend on somebody's opinion that they share. Okay, so most time people get influenced by things shared on Facebook or Twitter or anything like that. Take the facts, make your opinion. Don't take somebody's opinions. Okay, you can't, right? Okay, let's move on to the questions. Which of the following best represents the main point of the given passage? Already we've discussed it. We can connect it with the options. Campaigning strategies of American political group. Okay, different strategies. What are the different strategies? Let's say campaign, in-person campaign, that's one strategy. Campaign through media outlets is one strategy. Campaign through debates is another strategy. Campaign through freebies, not sure how much they are allowed, but that is another strategy. So those are called strategies. Are we talking about diverse strategies or are we talking about one deceptive strategy? So let's see that. So first one is a question mark. Next one, gauging the legitimacy of FT and American Ledger. I think we have something called as National Election Watch in India, and there are some groups of people who kind of try to look at how the campaigns are, or some people who try to say what is fake news and what is actual news, etc. It's becoming very popular, and it's actually hugely in demand also these days because of all kinds of information that gets shared on social media, etc. So when it comes to legitimacy of the factual information or information here, it's more like somebody saying that so much percentage of it is opinion, so much percentage is fact, or this is true information, but it is interpreted in a different manner. So that kind of legitimacy check, if it is done, then it is called legitimacy check or a fact check. But no, we are not talking about anything like that. Next, deceptive practices of political campaigning by American political groups. Maybe because deceptive tactics, maybe. Changing campaign strategies of American political group. Now this you could consider as an answer. This you could consider as an answer. But the better one for us here is, right, for 113, the better one is C. Okay, I hope the question is clear, guys. Are you following? If yes, please key in the chat box. I hope you understood how I tried to differentiate option A and option D and tried to connect with option C and how option C stands out. Because guys, when in options, you'll see the such words. Campaign strategies is discussed in the passage, and in 2 or 3 options, you're having it. FT and American Ledger are 2 examples standing out. These might cause troubles, but what is the main focus? What is that distinctive feature in the all sets of options? We always said in the previous class also, A minus B approach. Look for that keyword or look for that nuance which stands out and helps you to make decision. So C will become the answer there. Are you guys clear? If yes, if it's clear, please put in the chat box that you've understood. Yes? Okay, let me move on then to the next question. Which of the following, if true, would qualify as the assumption on which the author's argument is based? Whenever you have argument, whenever you have the word called argument, I always recommend you to identify the argument in the passage. Sometimes you might have multiple arguments also. And if you're not able to specifically look at the argument, okay, there are multiple points of view that you are not able to connect to a particular option or particular argument, then take some ideas from the options. Okay, and if it's in general entire passage, then the argument in the entire passage is more like author's main point. This point is like deceptive media strategies and they're troubling people and people are falling for it. That is what we could say. Okay, now. American political groups invested hugely on political campaigns. Are we talking about the money aspect in the passage? Is that the issue? No. Voters get influence from social media and deceptive news sites. Yes, that's what we are thinking. And that is the reason the whole focus and whole discussion on FT, American Ledger, Twitter, FB, and all these things are coming up in the passage. Social media is more effective for political campaigns than in-person campaigns. The naming of the website can play a more consequential role than this concept. Now, the content. Option C and D. These two lines have come up because of the way the sentences are there in the passage. In the last paragraph, currently, because of the way the events are, social media campaigns are dominating, or there's a possibility of going social media or using social media campaigns a lot. Like for instance, in pandemic, you can't do events so easily, and I'm sure many blamed India. Second wave, I mean, the second wave is blamed because of elections, and another one is some other activity. So these are two things that many people talked about that as reasons for the second wave. And of course, vaccinations and all. How far of it is genuine and all, that's a different thing. But yes, the media definitely screamed about that. Okay, so that's what it is here. But is that the assumption on which the argument is based? Let's see the next one. The naming of the website can play a more conceptual thing. This is related to the generic naming of FT. So those two specific liners are the reason behind these two options for us. But the whole aspect, why am I fighting about not having legitimate social media websites or legitimate information on social media, is because I believe people might get influenced. So that belief system of the people and people getting carried away because of news, deceptive news is the main reason, main assumption behind the entire argument, rather than the superficial decorations that we have around it. Okay, so that's the reason we would go with B here. I hope I'm clear with that. Raghav, I hope you're following. Samyukta, I hope you're following too. Okay, let's move on to the next question. Which of the following, if true, would weaken the author's argument? Whenever you have weakening, always attack the assumption. In the previous question, we asked about what was the assumption. The assumption is social media channels and deceptive channels might carry away people with wrong information, or they might get influenced. Now, if I have a statement, that is my assumption, right? Because I have the information about media channels going for social media aspect, and I'm believing that they'll get affected. So basically, social media is going to influence is what I'm trying to look at it. Okay, social media and deceptive news websites do not have a lot of influence on the audience. If they don't have a lot of influence, the whole worry of the author is not at all needed. So this kind of weakens my argument. It clearly attacks the perception of the author. Author's perception is it influences. The statement is clearly saying that it doesn't influence. So automatically gone case. In-person campaigns are more important than online thing. Now, some of you might think of this as an answer. B is trying to say something else is important. A is trying to say which one should not be considered or shouldn't be worried about. So observe the difference, the way the lines are given. Remember, communication is going to be a major thing in world for the past few decades. We've always heard that communication is the main thing, and how you project something is main thing, how it's interpreted is main thing, etc. When we talk to someone or when we discuss about something with a group of people, with a group of friends, assume you're planning a freshers party or a farewell party, or you're trying to come up with some ideas. There's a point of view or there's a point on which people have opposite aspects. I mean, they are not happy with that point. There's a point and people are not happy with that point. When such scenarios are there in life or in discussions, if you keep on adding that something else is beneficial or some other advantages are there or more additional features are there, it doesn't help. You need to always attack that thinking process. Why are these people thinking this is going to be a problem? Right? When you think and attack that particular point of view, then it becomes easy. Then it becomes easy. Got it, guys? So always, if you want your point of view to be convincing, or if you want others to agree, always attack the thinking process, the doubt that is there, or the reason for them to say no, and then your argument is going to be a smooth sail for you from there on. Okay? So that is what is going to be here. Here the dilemma in the author's mind is social media is going to have influence. And you're putting another thing that in-person campaigns are more important. Had there not been A, then I would have thought about B. Had there not been an A, I would have thought about B. But here, A is the best answer. Always comparative options also are something that we need to look at. A Free Telegraph and American Ledger plays an important role in educating voters. That's irrelevant. After the end of pandemic, online campaigns would lose charm. We cannot say that. People are always looking for new methodologies, and definitely the one which is low cost and high reach, and convenient. Low cost, high reach, convenient will dominate eventually also. So we cannot say that. That's again a different direction here, or it could be a continuing discussion or something else if the passage has to continue. 115 answer is A. Let's look at 116. Each of the following can be inferred from the passage about FT except. So you're talking about FT. What can you infer from this? The website is sponsored by Republican Governors Association. We have that information. It's sponsored by RGA. Even if we did not have the line that there's at the bottom of the article that it is written like this, or even if there's no line that RGA sponsors it, criticizing Democrats should give us that idea. We can still infer because it's an inferred question. The political positions of these websites are backed up by legitimate reporting. Now that's a question mark. This website criticizes Democrats and their political stances. Yes. Ulterior motive of this website is to influence voters in favor of Republican. So this is clearly given in the passage. This is clearly website criticizes Democrats is given in the passage. Ulterior motive is influence given. Can be inferred, it will be ACD. Except is the keyword here. If you miss that nuance, we'll make a mistake here. So answer 116 is B. Words like not, except, least likely, these three words you need to be cautious with. Next one, what role does the following statement play in the author's argument? Whenever you have such questions, always consider with regards to the passage how they are doing it. Sometimes you'll have two statements and how those two statements are linked with each other. You will have to play with the options here and also see how the information is there. The site's Twitter page says its goal is empowering public and exposing wrongdoing. So it's a statement that we have from this entire passage that we got. Is it a conclusion? Well, no, the conclusion is more like how they are influencing and people are getting carried away. That kind of direction we could go with. So this is not it. now plays no role. Well, this is a piece of data that we have in the passage. Am I saying that the author is just trying to fill? We need like 250 words of essay or 450 words of essay, and hence the author is just dumping information or trying to manipulate language or put something redundant here. Are we saying something like that? So that's not something that we have here. Okay. Next one, background information and premise. Background information and premise. This piece of data here, premise is something that we take it to be true, and it is a basis for the argument. Background is information is something which is like the data that we have, and which we can use for the argument. The data which we have, and we can support it for the passage, right? So that's what is called as background information. Now, is it the basis for the entire argument or is it supporting? Now, considering that, I would go with A as an option here. I would say among all the options that we have in this passage, this was the most trickiest one, etc. Okay? Let's move on to the next one then. I hope this is comfortable for each one of you. Raghav, Samyukta, Kavya, I hope you're following. Okay. Okay, guys, I hope you read the passage. It's an easy passage overall, not at all difficult, and probably you could connect well here with such information. In China, it was called Qi, the symbol for health. In Egypt, it was called Ankh, the symbol for eternal life. For the Phoenicians, the reference was synonymous for Aphrodite, the goddess of love and beauty. These ancient civilizations were referring to copper, a material that cultures across the globe have recognized as vital to our health for more than 500 years. When influenza bacteria like E. coli, superbugs like MRSA, or even coronaviruses land on most hard surfaces, they can live up to 4 to 5 days. But when they land on copper and copper alloys like brass, they die within minutes. We've seen viruses just blow apart, says Bill Kibble, professor of environmental healthcare at University of Southampton. They land on copper and it just degrades them. No wonder that in India, people have been drinking out of copper cups for millennia. Even here in United States, a copper line brings in your drinking water. Copper is a natural passive antimicrobial material. It can self-sterilize its surface without the need for electricity or bleach. Copper boomed during Industrial Revolution as a material for objects, fixtures, and buildings. Copper is still widely used in power networks. Copper market is in fact growing because the material is such an effective conductor. But the material has been pushed out of many building applications by a wave of new materials from the 20th century. Plastics, tempered glass, aluminum, and stainless steel are the materials of modernity, used for everything from architecture to Apple products. Brass doorknobs and handrails went out of style as architects and designers opted for sleeker looking and often cheaper materials. Now Kevil believes it's time to bring copper back in public places and hospitals in particular. In face of an unavoidable future full of global pandemics, we should be using copper in healthcare, public transit, and even homes. And while it's too late to stop COVID, it's not too early to think about next pandemic. So here, if you look at it, one thing that I want you to remember whenever you have such passages, generally it's not very difficult to read. Obviously, it's easy to read. You have such information here. And you have the last lines here. These last lines clearly, evidently that what is going to come up next. Always, if you have a question, sometimes you get a questions like how the passage is going to shape up next. When you have such lines and such question types, the answer should focus on the entire passage. Obviously, it should follow the flow of the entire passage, and you should also be connected with the passage that we have. I mean, the last lines, because this is something which is close to what we see in para-completion question types. Remember, there is something called as fill in the blanks that you are all familiar with, but sometimes you might be asked to fill in an entire sentence. So there's a missing sentence, and you need to pick from the options which sentence could be connected. Whenever you have such question types, what we do is we stick to the main idea of the passage, and we also focus on the flow of content, how it is being written, how it is being developed. That is what it is. Okay? So please make sure that you keep an idea or keep an emphasis on the last lines also, because what happens is as we come towards the end, we lose focus and we are in a rush to move on to something. Have patience and read them carefully. That's what I want to say. Next one. Which of the following best represents the main point of the given passage? Which of the following best represents the main point of the given passage? The focus is on copper being used and copper's benefits, how copper was useful in the past, how the author is trying, how we can use copper in future, think about the next pandemic, all these main lines where we can take it. So it's definitely copper and its benefits in terms of dealing with bacteria and other things. So let's see. Copper is known to be oligodynamic in nature, sterilizing effect of metals on bacteria, and they can destroy bacteria very effectively. Looks reasonable. According to Ayurveda, drinking copper enriched water first thing in the morning on an empty stomach helps balance all three doshas. They're trying to talk about benefits again. Civilizations have recognized copper's antimicrobial properties for centuries. It's time to bring them back. Okay, so you're trying to say that it was used earlier and there's a change and other things have come up. Now it's time to bring back. Apart from fine-tuning your digestive system to perform better, copper also helps your body break down fat and eliminates it more efficiently. Now, if you really have to solve and attack this passage, you have 2 or 3 ways you can think of it. First one is you already read the passage and you have some gist about main idea. Now, you can think of what the passage is. And if you remember the flow of the passage, it was evidently where we discussed that copper is not new, copper is there from the past, and towards the end we closed it with saying that copper needs to be brought back. If you look at that aspect, you can clearly say C as a better answer. That is one way of attacking this question. Now suppose you're not able to have, you're not having enough time, you're lost, you're lost, you have, your mind is stuck, frozen mind, right? And you needed direction, right? So then we do reverse engineering. A, B, C, A, B, D, if you look at it, they're all trying to talk about benefits of copper, right? C is one thing that is trying to talk about bringing copper back. It was there earlier and bring it back. So the benefits are inherent. Why I didn't, this word of antimicrobial includes the benefits aspects and it's there in the past, bring it back again. That idea is projected better here. So even if you're stuck, confused or directionless, don't know which way to think, go from the options, they sometimes give you idea too. It's a pretty easy one. You should not be stuck in actually, but if you are, this is my suggestion. Next one, which of the following supports the author's argument in the given passage? Author is for copper and bringing back copper. So we need to look at options which are in favor of that. Those are the 2 things we can think. Let's see the options. Health officials recently cautioned baths against using copper. So you don't want copper. Ayurvedic drinking vessels made of copper are said to oxygenate blood, reduce cancer risk, and prevent aging. So this is the benefit part of it. Let's see. Claims that are scientifically unproven. Guys, if you read partial information and up to this part, it might make you feel like an answer. But the moment you don't read the remaining part, you are into a trap. That's a pretty much trap option. And despite the fact that copper does have microbial properties, using these could harm more than good. This is again, A and C are happily against author's statements. Happily, you can easily eliminate them. B is a trap word. If someone doesn't have a patience to read till the end, you will fall for it. Hence, the final answer is D, none of the above. As I told you already also, none of the above and all the above. These are 2 words that we need to be cautious with. All the above, that option gets cancelled even if one option is wrong. But none of the above, we really have to have patience to make everything right. Okay. Like for instance, you have 4 options obviously, and the 4th one is all the above. Even if you prove 2 are right, and I think you'll come close to the 4th option as all the above, unless there's 1 and 2 only, right? But none of the above, like you have to make sure all the 3 are wrong. So here, caution is required. Next one. Which of the following, if true, most weakens the author's argument in the given passage? Again, weakens. High concentration of copper in diet can result in brittle bones, and higher concentration can result in toxicity. Sleek and shining stainless steel doorknobs and push plates look reassuringly clean on a hospital door. Here you're trying to say doorknobs can be better. You can go for copper. Instead of copper, you should go for steel as doorknobs. But the thing is, that's not the main argument in the passage. Maybe yes, this is true. Steel looks better than copper. Nice look, clean look. But is that my main argument? Is that argument part? Is that an additional information or some supporting data, or that we need to look at it? If your hospital is being renovated, try to retain old copper hardware or have it repeated. Working in this lab with some of the most feared pathogens in the world, a scientist has demonstrated that not only does acetone kill bacteria, it also kills viruses. You're talking about acetone. The question is about copper and you're talking about acetone. If we look at it, in all these things, question is about copper, this is acetone, gone case. Sleek and stainless steel doorknobs. This is not my answer because the focus is not about having copper as a doorknob or having steel as a doorknob. If the focus was more on that, how our buildings, any building's doorknob should be built, how these days we have seen that doorknobs which are like UV rays fall on the doorknobs and they automatically clean. If that is the discussion part, then maybe I'll look into that, but no, not here. Next one. High concentration of coppers in diet can result in brittle bones, and higher concentration can result in toxicity. So A and C are the things in here. A is a better option here. C is trying to make use of some old stuff. It's don't throw copper away, but it's not. It's like, okay, I have old furniture, let's use it. It's not reaching out to the actual intent about why and what is that need with copper. Okay, so it's more about saving something, but this is not about benefits of copper. Nothing to do with antimicrobial properties. Okay, next one. Which of the following statements can follow the concluding paragraph of the given passage? Yeah, here we have it. What can be coming up next? In animal models, liver toxicity has been demonstrated in several species, and there are case reports of liver disease in humans ingesting excessive concentrations of copper. So this is actually against copper. So that cannot be the passage for us because our focus has been for copper. The tone of the passage is also something that you can always look at it, right? In which line we are looking at it. And I also said flow of the passage, tone of the passage. These are some things you can look at. In real-world testing, copper proves its worth. In 2015, researchers compared infection rates at 3 hospitals and found that when copper alloys were used in 3 hospitals, it reduced infection rates by 58%. The last paragraph kind of hints that we should get into hospitals. We should get into home also. Hospitals was the first thing, because pandemic, and then up to home. So this can be my answer, but let's see other options. That's one of the real benefits of copper. In other words, using copper doesn't come with risk or over-prescribing antibiotics. It's just a good idea. This doesn't support the idea of how to enter into hospitals and all. Copper accumulation in liver is also associated with other diseases. Gone case. So 121B is the best possible answer for us. Okay? I hope that's clear. Which of the following can be inferred from the passage? Tempered glass has been used since ancient times. No, because it was copper we talked about, then glass has come. Plastic is not biodegradable. We didn't talk about it being degradable or non-degradable. That kind of environmental impacts are not discussed, even though it is true, because I think it takes a lot of time for plastic to get degraded, right? That's why we want to go no plastic zone. Aluminum and copper have similar properties. Physical properties are not discussed a lot because copper is used for conduction, and all, nowhere we said aluminum can also be used for conduction, etc. Other materials we discussed, but no, not on the properties aspect. So this is also gone. Right? We only discussed that plastic, tempered glass, aluminum, and stainless steels are materials of modernity used for everything from architecture to Apple products. But we didn't say that all physical properties, lightweight, density, electrical conduction, all those things are called properties, and we didn't discuss that. Brass doorknobs and handrails went out of style as architect and designer opted for sleek looking and often cheaper material. It is given in brackets, so definitely this can be my answer here. Pretty much doable and easy passage, not at all difficult. Very good. Shivatma, good. Can you key in all the answers for the third passage? I hope you followed all the questions here. Good. Okay, then start reading the fourth passage, and if you have any doubts, you could get along, type in key in the chat box. So far we have three passages, easy to begin. First three passages are pretty doable and readable. Coming to the fourth one, this passage is a little time consuming. And let me also give you a hint here. I'm not sure in which order you will attack your paper. We've always discussed in CLAT analysis and in some of the sessions about how you should handle your different sections. I mean, in which order you need to progress. That's one thing that we discussed in our CLAT analysis also. You can check that video too. And this year's analysis and even last year's, both the analysis you can refer, and we discussed about why and how it is recommended for you to approach a particular order of passages, order of sections. But let's look at the order of passages and things like that. It's a paper-based exam, so definitely you will have an option to look into it. I will not recommend that you read all the 5 passages and then start doing it because your retention to some extent, or it's a waste of time. That much is not recommended. But within the logical reasoning section, you start reading a passage, and if you feel this passage is causing a lot of regression, then move on to the other passages and come back. Like for instance, if the passage 4 is your first passage, if the passage 4 is the first passage in your section in the paper that you get it, move on to the next. Because what happens is the psychological effect that an exam atmosphere creates kinds of brings students down. And most important thing that we need for doing passages or anything is focus. And if you lose your focus, you will get. So I don't want that to happen here. Because this is one passage that is a little, we have seen in the previous class also, one passage is troubling us a little more, while others are pretty much doable. And this one thing should not demoralize you. Okay? Remove the 4 or 5 questions, you still have 25 questions to attack, right? So always look positively and hope. Let's look at it. I think that for many of us in childhood, the ability to attach intently to a few cultural objects whose meaning seem mysterious, excessive, or oblique in relation to the codes most readily available to us, became a prime resource for survival. So here, you're trying to say that people are attached to certain things and which are mysterious and excessive or oblique in relation. We needed for these sites to be where the meanings didn't line up tidily with each other, and we learned to invest those sites with fascination and love. We try to connect with such things. This can't help the coloring, the adult relation to cultural texts and objects. In fact, it's almost hard for me to imagine another way of coming to care about literature to give a lifetime to it. So authors more in favor to reading. The demands on both the text and reader from so intent and attachment can be multiple, even paradoxical. Okay, for me, a kind of formalism, a near identification with the writing I cared for at the level of sentence structure, metrical pattern, rhyme, was one way of trying to appropriate what seemed the numinous and resistant power of chosen objects. Education made it easy to accumulate tools for this formalist approach because the texts that magnetized me happened to be novels and poems. It's impressed me deeply the way others of my generation and since seem to have invented for themselves, in spontaneity of great need, the tools for formalist apprehension of other less prestigious, ubiquitous kinds of text. Right? For me, this strong formalist investment didn't imply an evacuation of interest from the passional, the imagistic, ethical dimensions of text, but quite the contrary. The need I brought to books and poems was hardly to be circumscribed. And I felt I knew I would have to struggle to wrest from them, sustaining the news of the world, ideas, myself, and my kind. The reading practice founded on such basic demands and intuitions had necessarily to run against the grain of most patent available formula for young people's reading and life, against the grain often of the most accessible voices, even in text themselves. At any rate, becoming a perverse reader was never a matter of my condescension to text, rather a surplus charge of my trust in them to remain powerful, refractory, and exemplary. Now, the moment this passage is read, some people might get stuck and some might feel it a lot vocab intense. Words like, there are different types of readers. Some of them are very comfortable with their basic vocabulary, like you are decent enough with your vocab builder or any other word lists that you have, and you could understand them or use them or apply them. Like for instance, condescension is a word you're familiar with. It's more like uh, to look down on something like that. And you have the word like exemplary, which is a like an exemplary thing or a better off or a positive one that you could think of. So such words that we have in passages, you don't need to really worry about their technical meaning. And with CLAT becoming passage oriented, the comfort that we have with contextual vocabulary can be used a lot. Okay? So that's the reason most people haven't worried a lot about word lists in the past 1 year also. But there are certain words like formalist project. These things might be causing trouble. Even in the last CLAT also, sometimes there are words like liberalism, a simple word like liberalism, even though we know the word liberal, might stop someone. So what you have to do in such scenarios is look around, try to find some clues and understand what it is. And I would prefer to put this as the last part of it. Always, this will be my last passage to do. And even when I'm trying to do this also, I'll try to look at questions and attack from that angle, because if I am able to decipher the passage and its meaning comfortably, go for it in that direction. Some students are really good. They've got eclectic reading habits and they're like very good. I had students who are good with reading with philosophical passages comfortably actually. So such people can go in this approach, but for others, attack from the questions or pack it to the end so that you don't lose your focus. So this entire passage is basically about a person, an individual, and who is trying to say that he is associated with books a lot. And then he always looked at books in a formalistic approach. That means he tried to read them and try to bring in his own ideas. He tried to criticize them, etc. He was more like an active reader and trying to not just interpret what is given, but his point of views are brought in. And by doing that, he didn't mean to say that the books are of not great quality. But that's how he has dealt with the books. That's how the basic structure of the passages. And he also tried to say that he was different from other kids. When other kids were associated with different things, he was in relation with something else, which was more related to reading aspects. Okay? So let's see. The thing, author is least likely to agree with what? So he's not going to agree with this aspect. A child's mind works differently from an adult's mind. We have a thing. This can't help the coloring the adult relation. Child and adult aspects are mentioned here, and the author himself kind of says children and what have become an adult mind. We have those lines here, so this can't be my answer. Comics and genre movies are lesser text. First paragraph, last lines, we do have the word like less prestigious, more ubiquitous kinds of text. Less prestigious, more ubiquitous kind of text. We have that line there. For a child to live, having a relationship with the literature is necessity. Now, the author himself said that he was associated with literature, while his friends were not, while other people were not so much. So it's a necessity for all. We cannot deduct that. Formalism may be related to semantics and syntax. Now, you know the word syntax, that is pretty much common. Semantics is more to the language style and grammar aspects. Now, author kind of said the word formalism, which is more like bringing in a literary criticism aspect, but He also said his education has helped him to observe the sentence structure and other aspects. So we can put it as also a true statement and he would agree with it. So hence, going by elimination technique and connecting with the few pieces of data that we could understand. Remember, in previous session also I said, when you have data which you are not able to decipher and you have time to attack this passage, go to the questions and also try to focus on those lines which are readable and easy to interpret rather than focusing and getting glued to those terminology or jargon that dominates your thinking process or that affects your thinking process and reduces your speed. Look around that piece of data which can help you out, because now is the crucial time, guys. This is not the time where I can tell you how you do well in such scenarios, how do you improvise here. This is the time more to attack, so hence the strategy should be approached. Okay, which of the following is true with regards to the last line of the passage? So you're going more related to the last line of the passage. The author felt she was superior to the text and than the one who wrote. The author found it difficult to trust the text at first. The author felt superior to the people from her generation and the rest that followed. The author's way of approaching a text was different from the generally practiced way. Now, in this kind of sense, we can definitely say that the author has his or her own approach in terms of dealing with it, but it doesn't mean I am condescending the text, but I'm trying to rather of the surplus charge of my trust in them to remain powerful, refractory, and exemplary. So here he is not trying to condescend the text by his bringing in his own ideas. That is evidently said. So hence, the concept of superiority or concept of dealing with it in terms of trust aspects are ruled out, and author's way of approaching is different. That is what we could consider here, because evidently he clearly said, I'm not interested in condescending the text, but it is more like my own trust and my own confidence and my own interpretations are coming into picture here. So going by that line, D is a better answer. Next one, which of the following is a valid conclusion from the passage? Okay, conclusion. All kids are curious about mysterious object. All is a generic statement. So whenever you have a generic word, I mean, generalized word, all, some, many, we always need to be cautious. So let's look at that word with caution and proceed to other options. The author struggled to keep away her own ideas from her understanding of text. A child's mind works mysteriously. Author wasn't passionate about text that she read once she grew up. So 125 happily D is gone here, right? A and B, all kids are curious about mysterious objects and child's mind works mysteriously. From the first line of the passage, you might try to connect to some way to this, but that's a trap for us. The focus of the passage was more in terms of author's perception of reading different and the formalistic approach that we have. So going by that, this line is a conclusion. This is not about one line or a factual information which you consider to be true with regards to the passage. Which of the following is true with the passage? Which of the following you will agree with the passage? If such statements are there, you might be starting to think about A and C. Is it right or wrong, etc. But the question is about conclusion, right? Conclusion is always the end. Right, you have some piece of data and what is the end of it, what could you be ultimately inferring from the given statements and given information. So she struggled, the author struggled, and formalistic approach of the author can be best connected here with the 125th answer. Next one, which of the following tools doesn't contribute to the structure, meaning of the passage? Now, this is an interesting question type. Sometimes you do get it. Like, which of the following is not in the passage? Which of the following writing styles are not discussed? So this is more related to and connected to styles or the way the information is given, right? Style of the passage, the way the passage is written. It could be analytical passage or information oriented, descriptive oriented, that kind of thing. Or it could be related to the kind of information that you have in the passage. Right? So in such cases, when you have such things, what we have to do is always look at your 4 options that you have here and try to connect, okay, if this is the option, what kind of information should I have in the passage? Okay, so this is my option. Think of what kind of option information you should have and connect it with the passage. Okay, look at the option, think how the passage should be and connect it to the passage. That's what you could see. First person narrative. First person narrative is nothing but the author trying to say I, me, my, etc. So this doesn't contribute aspect doesn't work here. Personal occurrence, well, that's a statement where Occurrence is something happening or an event kind of thing. Personal is about an individual. So let's put that there and come back to the next one. Comparison and contrast. The author tried to do how she reads and how others do, how others have different gadgets and how she looks into reading. So A and C are happily gone. Let's look at D. Digression, deviating from the topic. Is there any way that you have seen a digression? What do you mind by digression or deviation from a particular topic? Remember, whenever you have such scenarios, it's basically like what example can I give? Yeah, anytime when you listen to interviews, right? Interviews, especially from political point of view, you could look at it, or from sometimes corporate interviews also, corporate houses interviews. The people who work through stocks and all, they want to extract some kind of critical information, and companies cannot reveal that information. Sometimes they try to evade the answer a little, because there's a time that could be a big decision which should not be relieved. It's not intentionally done, but it is required for them. So they might avoid that question or deviate from that, introduce something else where you feel that yes, these people are not talking about it. Like for instance, I give you an example. I ask students why your score in math is low, right? Then students might tell my score in English is high. Look at it. So that is like you're deviating the topic. I'm talking about your math score and you're taking me to another area. So nothing like that is seen. Now coming to the personal occurrence, should I have this as an answer or not? The author really talked about her instance of reading books, her instinct of how education has helped, how she focused on text and other things. So her situations are mentioned. Got it? So I cannot rule out that as a full option, and hence D is the best possible answer here. Okay? Right. Which of the following cannot be regarded as an inference from the passage? Again, a cannot be. Whenever you have such words, alert buttons on. Novels and poems are readily available, children, and are most popular. Novels and poems are available? That is the first question that I need to ask. And are they really very popular? That's another question. When you have such information, two pieces of data, they validate both, otherwise it becomes an error. Children attaches themselves to a cultural object. Formalism is one of the many ways to study a text. Author felt that she was taking over the power of a text by engaging formalistically with it. So here the author is trying to control or make her version here. So I would go with A as a best possible answer here, because not many children were into books. That's evidently there. The author is different from the rest of the children. So others were associated with other objects while the author associated with books. Okay. And coming to the taking over the power of a text by engaging formalistically with it, the author has a thing where she says that my intention was not about condescending, but it was more in terms of my trust in them to remain powerful and refractory and exemplary, etc. So that doubt and that kind of lines have come up. So that thinking process is there here. So A is a better possible answer choice for us here. Okay, pretty much easy one. Can you keep answers, guys? I'll repeat the answers. Okay, so yeah, so 123 answer is C, 124 is answer is D, 125 is B, 126 is D, and 127 is A. Okay, so those are the four answer keys that you have. Good. Okay, let's move on to the next one. Music is all around, rewarding us in so many ways. At one end of the scale, music is energizing. At the another end of the scale, it can help to calm the most stressful situations. One is energizing, activating us. Other one is calming down. Lullabies and other tunes have been played to children for many years to lull them to sleep or simply slow things down a little. Listening to music is a soothing and wonderful way to bond and interact with your child. Hearing a familiar piece of music can also be very reassuring for a child when, for example, they find themselves in a new environment. Since classical music has a stimulating effect on the body and mind, which in turn can lead to improved physical and emotional health, it is being explored whether it can also help the development of newborn babies and toddlers. In an experiment, two different types of recorded music were played for neonates in adjacent nurseries in a hospital. In nursery A, classical music was played. In nursery B, rock music was played. After 2 weeks, it was found that babies in nursery A cried less and the other one cried. So in this passage, it's a simple passage. If you look at the word limit also, it's not too lengthy, easy to read. If I have shortage of time, maybe this is something that I can easily jump on. If you look at the word size, 4 and 5, I would prefer doing 5 before 4. Okay, and you have the statements here about music being rewarding to everybody and how it calms and energizes people. And we talked about lullabies and how it's used for children and how it helps toddlers and all that. Then we talk about an experiment in 2 different places. Again, whenever we talk about an experiment, it's like A and B are 2 sets of people. When experiments are like samples, again for us, whenever samples come, we need to always think about sample size and sample composition. Composition of sample. Right? What is the composition of the sample? Who are made up of the sample? These are 2 things that you can always look at. This is how you would think of when you're reading the passage, and then move on to the questions. It is mentioned in the passage that music can be energizing at one end and music can be calm. Energizing is more like stimulating. Another one is like calming you down, putting you like to rest or slowing things down. So basically, there are 2 opposite things. Activating is one thing, and putting you to rest is another thing. So analogy is the first word that we have. Analogy is basically like analogous scenario, like 2 different places, they're similar kind of thing. If it's music and music like something else, like something does in other area, like another thing, music like dance for some people, or and it makes you happy, makes you sad kind of statements. If there is anything like that, then it will become analogy. Deduction and inference are more like you deduce something. Paradox is opposite kind of thing. One is like, how can it's like I always lie. I always lie. What does that mean? Am I telling truth now, or am I speaking incorrect information? That is what is paradoxical kind of thing, where you have a little bit of contradictory kind of thing. These words, though it's more like stimulant and suppressor. Look at it more like that, because if you look at the word stressful, and then you might get confused. But music stimulates and music lulls you down. That's how you need to interpret in the statement. Okay, then next one. Music that is known to have soothing effect on adults and children is also expected to have soothing effect on newborn babies. Which of the following has similar logic? Now, this is something related to the parallel reasoning that we have learned earlier also. Parallel reasoning always connect with the question properly and decipher the options carefully. Music that is known to have soothing effects on adults and children is also expected to have soothing effects on newborn babies. So basically, it's something that works on one group, works on another group also. South Indians like, and again that is related to age group kind of thing that we have. South Indians like Carnatic, so they'll also enjoy Hindustani and Western. So it's South Indians, and you are not talking about North Indians, East Indians, West Indians. So it's basically another thing for South Indians only. So that's not correct. Bahubali gross used revenues USA and UK, so it's expected to do well in Africa also. You're talking about revenues generated, and you're not talking about another set of people here. So I would pause this and move on to the next. Medicines that show positive effects on rats is expected to show similar effects on human beings, and maybe I might have to think of this as an answer, but again, we are moving from one species to another species. So let's see that. Delhi Public School in Gachibowli has very good reputation for middle school and high school. It is expected that primary section started recently will also develop good reputation. So again, as I said, group 1 and the first Two options are more related to the groups aspect, but the age aspect or within the same species aspect, I would go with D as a benefit thing. C, I am ruling out it's a different species. B, I'm talking about benefits and revenues in a different place. D seems to be a better off thing there. It seems to be a better off thing compared to the any other options. Okay. In evaluating the validity of the conclusion suggested by the experiment above, it would be most important to know which of the following. This question type we have the musical preferences of parents of two groups of newborns. Whether newborns in both nurseries were equally healthy and happy at the start of the experiment. Whether loud rock music can damage the hearing of newborns. Whether the music was played in nurseries at all times or only at particular times. Now, you're talking about the conclusion of the experiment. Which of the following would be important to know? As I told you, whenever you have experiments, it's always important that we connect the sample and sample composition. When I said sample composition is like that, if the two experiments are done and two experiments are done on two different type of people, then we cannot come to a conclusion, right? If the experiments are conducted on similar type of people, only then we can agree that this experiment and its results are right. So let's see the options. The musical preference of parents of two groups of newborns. It's not about musical preference, it's the outcome on the children. So that's what the focus has to be. Whether newborns in both nurseries were equally healthy and happy. Now, one set of children tried, another set of children didn't try. If the kids in set B were already weak, they are having some fever or some other issues, then it need not be music, but there are other reasons to cause that trouble or the result might get affected because of that, unless the starting conditions, right? For instance, if there's a race course that we are running, right? Everybody starts from one start line. If people start from different start lines, then they have a different advantage there. They have to, then their destination spots also should be like that, right? Finally, after you can clear the finish line, which spot should you take, right? So starting conditions are similar or not is what we are talking about. So whether newborns in both nurseries were equally healthy and happy at the start. If the similarities are there, then conclusion becomes valid. If there are no similarities, then conclusion doesn't become valid. So that's what we are saying. The loud music can damage the hearing of newborns. We are talking about one type of music and the conclusion whether it is right or wrong. We're not talking about another type of music. Will that also work? Okay, so this is wrong. Whether the music was played in nurseries at all times or only at certain times, even then, whether it is sometime or many times, how much credit do you give for it will be the point of view that you might take it here, but otherwise B seems to be a much possible answer. B seems to be a much possible answer for us here. Okay. Next one. Which of the following additional experimental data would support the hypothesis that classical music is beneficial to the development of newborn? Okay. The neonates in the nursery where no music was played fared better than those in the nursery B. Which of the following additional experimental data would support the hypothesis that classical music is beneficial to the development? So basically, you're talking about more information, which one strengthens, which other information will strengthen it further. Neonates in the nursery where no music was played fared better than those in B. Now this is contradictory, right? Nursery A contained 15% more premature babies than nursery B. Okay, you are trying to say a different sample size here. Let's see if that really helps us. Newborns in nursery A cried less, suffered few minor ailments, and gained more weight than the newborns in a nursery with no music. So this is it is for the given argument. Ratio of nurses to newborns in nursery B was 1:4. Nursery A was 1:6. You're having less nurses comparatively. That is a point of view that you're having. So in 131, among all the options here, A is happily gone, and B and D, they are trying to show some kind of different compositions, the sample differences they are trying to show. And you are trying to say here about how they cried less. It's not just crying, but ailments and weight, also another aspect that you're looking at it. So C would be a much beneficial answer, because B and D tries to give us some differences in terms of people, not on the music aspect. All right. Preconditions or sample conditions or composition of the passage aspects, composition of the sample aspects are being discussed, but not the musical aspect. And here its question is more related to the musical aspect here. Okay. B kinds of says even though they are premature, that's why they were better off, or maybe they benefited more. That kind of idea comes there. And less nurses are better or more nurses are better. That kind of discussion comes in the, so C is a better option here. Okay. Let's key in the answers here, and I hope you're following. Yeah. Are you guys following, guys? Is it clear? Any questions so far about different passages? Can we move on strong and weak arguments? Now, whenever you have strong and weak arguments, we have arguments here, strong and weak arguments. Sometimes you get strong weak arguments, sometimes you get assumptions, conclusions, course of actions, analytical reasoning. They take less time to do it, so obviously go for it. That will give you some kind of comfort in terms of starting the passage, right? So I recommend, they take less time to solve also. So if you're comfortable, practice them. Your knowledge pack material has more question types on this, and obviously your skill pack also has it. And when we look at argument questions, each question type, whether it is assumption, you need to think like if you made a statement, how would you think? Conclusion is like how other person interpreted this particular statement. And now when it comes to arguments, strong and weak arguments, it's more like if I were a judge, how would I interpret the statement? That's how you need to think. If this piece of data is given to me, how much importance do I give it to it? Will I really consider it as an answer or a possibility? That's what we need to think. And in order to help our decisions in terms of strong and weak arguments, few things that you can keep in mind. First one is relevance. How relevant is this with regards to given question? Like for instance, when you have a statement and your option, if it is not relevant but it looks true, it is not relevant but it's like confusing sometimes, is it really relevant to the given question? That is the first thing that you can ask yourself. Sometimes you'll have situation like true but irrelevant kind of things. You need to be cautious there also. So relevance is the key word that you can tell yourself in terms of elimination strategies for strong weak arguments. Another one is a strong weak argument should have a proper reasoning kind of thing. Like likes and dislikes are like opinions. Strong weak arguments cannot be made. A judge cannot take a decision based on his opinion. He has facts. He needs to consider that. He needs to filter the evidence. Look at the evidence and see which evidence is relevant. Actually, even if there's evidence, is it relevant or not? Like I have an alibi. For instance, in a particular case, I have an alibi. Let's say. Okay, I have an alibi. Just because I have an alibi, is the alibi at the right time? If having that alibi can protect the person from not being at a different place, those aspects also have to be considered. So relevance and reason, it should not be an opinion. It should support the argument, or what is it doing to the argument? That's what you need to ask yourself. Now, it would be an injustice to those, so should seniority be the only criteria for promotions? Only. That's an extreme word, guys. Should seniority be the Only criteria. The moment you get these words, only, it's an extreme word. Always an alert button should go on. So, and before proceeding to arguments, I always recommend you to have your own framework or, for your answers also, because it helps. Because statements sometimes are confusing and we'll fall for it. So have your thinking process developed and proceed. Should seniority be only criteria? Then I would say no. Somebody might be in an organization for 10 years. Just because you are in an organization for 10 years, you cannot become the CEO of the organization. What did you contributed? What did you contribute? How did you contribute? How much skill sets have you acquired over a period of time? How much impact and benefit that you created towards the organization? That is what is important. Your promotion will depend on how much value you added. The duration over a period of time that you are associated with something doesn't make you someone deserve the punishment promotion. That is something that you have to be careful with. Tomorrow in future, when you grow up and when you get into jobs, you should always remember this: how much value am I adding year on to year on? Am I learning new things? Am I improving? That is a question that you need to constantly ask. Otherwise, then I would say there's a new principal to the school, but there's a student who's studying in the school from 10 years, from kindergarten to high school. Will the student become senior? No. Because of the seniority in terms of association with the school? No. A parent who is associated with the school for 10 years, will that person become senior to the principal? No. Right? Seniority is more in terms of how much value that you add to a particular role, contribution. Okay, so that's what we need to look at. Let me look at options now. And by the way, I have my options here. Only one is strong, only two is strong, one and two are strong, all the three are strong. So I'll have to look at eliminating something and it becomes easy for me. It would be an injustice to those who are more deserving and suitable for higher position than their senior counterparts. Looks like a possibility just because if you keep age as an upper limit. Like for instance, in CLAT, when in tie they go for legal. That's a statement that we had. If people say in CLAT, when in tie, my first priority is people with higher age will give benefit. I'm sure you guys will fight for it. Sometimes some scenarios they go for it, but I'm sure you'll fight for it. Next, senior employees do feel humiliated. Somebody's feelings cannot be reasons for us to do something. You have to do something which is right or wrong, which is right for the organization. If you take decisions for an organization based on people's opinion, you're going to become an emotional set of thing. It makes sense if you're in a movie making industry where you make a story based on emotions of the people. That makes sense. It becomes a hit, but not businesses are run like that. Senior employees are more experienced and must be rewarded for the same. Now, option 3 kind of says senior employees are more experienced. Now, if seniority is combined with experience, which is required for the role and the skill sets, then there's nothing wrong in the thing. But the question was not more aimed like that. So we'll have to see the options clearly here. All three are strong cannot be said. All three are strong is cannot be said. Only two is strong cannot be said. Right? Only two is strong cannot be said. Experience in terms of promotion requirement, experience in terms of being in the company, experience in terms of doing the job. How do we do that? Right? So, and the argument, should we have it or not? I would prefer A as a better possible answer in this case. Because you're inferring with seniority comes experience. And then others will get affected automatically because if you only give importance to seniority. Move on to the next. Should there be a track on maximum number of contestants for parliamentary elections in any constituency? Whenever this question is there, I think we have seen it multiple times, number of people. Sometimes it's like you need to have enough sample size, obviously, but how much percentage of people are actually liked? That's also a question that comes up. Like if, for instance, elections are done and there's only 1% of people liked a particular person ultimately, then just look at it. What percentage of votes did they get actually? All right, that is not a strong, what to say, judgment from the people's sides according to me. But again, let's see the options. So two things are important. Everybody should get a right, and other one is percentage of votes we have to consider. So let's see options. This will make the parliamentary elections more meaningful as voters can make a considered judgment for casting their vote. Obviously, they can have, if too diverse a choice, it becomes difficult. There's a limitation. Good amount of people will get good amount of percentage of votes. So going by that, it makes sense. In a democratic country, any person fulfilling the eligibility criteria can contest elections. And shouldn't be restrictions? Yes, obviously. Unnecessary burden on election commission, that's an opinion. As I said earlier, something which is difficult to do should not be a reason. Something which is easy to do should not be a reason. What is important should be looked at. Okay. Next one. All multinational companies should make it mandatory for their employees to participate. Mandatory is like compulsory, and everybody should make it to participate in social and community services. Yes, it is the only way to de-stress employees. Only is an extreme word, so I don't go for it. No, it is up to the individuals to decide. I would go with second one as a statement here in terms of the answer choice. Because only way employees can de-stress, no, they can have spas, you can have events, you can have celebrations and many other things there. Okay, so here we are with strong and weak arguments and other question types. Strong weak, as I said, always look for a reason. Sometimes the options could be tricky and troubling, guys, and in that case, just come back later. That's what I would say. Don't get lost, because the moment you lose focus, it becomes confusing. The moment you start getting confused with one option, your focus gets affected. So when you feel something is tricky or something is confusing, move on to and come back later. And what happens is, I've seen this a lot, and with me over years of my experience, when your mind is cool, composed, many of your accurate answers will be right. The moment your mind is not cool and composed, the moment you have other thoughts coming in, you miss lots of words. It happens with anyone. Okay, it happens with anyone. For instance, I might miss reading the word least likely, right? I might just read it as likely, and then I'll bother like, why is this as an answer? There is a possibility that we humans make such mistakes when we are having other thoughts in mind. So when in exam, focus only on exam. Focus on that one question. I don't want you to worry about anything else. Don't worry about how the paper is. Don't worry about will you get a seat. Don't worry about anything. Just focus on that question. So that's my suggestion today, guys. And if you have any question types or anything, please key in the chat box and we could look at it. Pretty much doable paper and not very difficult here. And most of the question types are reasonable. And three passages, except one passage, rest of them were readable. And always look at the question types. Today we have focused on, I think we did get some question types on parallel reasoning. That was nice one. And we also got question types about role play. These are two other question types that we can think of when it comes to reasoning. We did a lot of main idea question types also. You know how to discuss. We also discussed about two logical flaws if you connected well. One of the logical flaw was more on generalized reading, and the other one was more on sample size. I think those are two key takeaways that you can take it. Okay, any questions? So let me ask you, what two logical flaws have you considered from this session of ours? Because reasoning is all about logical flaws, and getting accustomed to logical flaws will help you. Any two logical flaws that you learn? You could key in. If you have any questions, you key in the chat box. Okay. All the best, Raunak. That's what I could say. ask yourself why that's happening, then maybe you'll find a solution. That's what I would say from today's reasoning class. When something is happening, ask why. It helps. Okay, then, guys, have a good day. Let's move on. And tomorrow you have another session. I think it's GK session by Narissa. And later on Friday, you have Padma ma'am's legal session. Yeah, I do remember one student coming across in the last class that how do I prepare in the last 20 days and etc. Mocks is one question, one thing that I would say, practice on the mocks and practice with the question types and approaches. That will help you because yes, if you just started being alert, that's the suggestion that I can give you. There are going to be many questions, but if you if it is like a strengthening weakening question type, right? Attacking the entire passage might sound difficult. Then go back to your knowledge pack questions and all, where you have simple passages and questions. You learn the approach and then come back to a bigger passage. That's how you would do it. Dealing with a small passage is more like to understand that specific area or a specific question type. So if you want to master a specific question type, go back to the smaller chunks of questions. This also helps you for IELTS and other things coming up. I think you have exams coming up, and MMS LAT is another few days. Symbiosis is around 10th, and obviously you have CLAT and IELTS in this month. So July is a month of exams for us now. So the entire hangama we have usually in March is going to be now. So make sure that you focus on that. Okay, and practice. Obviously focus on the question types and attack how you have to attack, and it becomes easy. Okay then, guys, have a good day, and I assume there are no doubts then. Let's end it for today.